We've already discussed it here on VisualPolitik. Argentina is a country where football is practically a state religion, and where not a single decade goes by without at least one major economic crisis. For decades, this country has been dominated by a political model, a kind of ideology, a political current, Peronism, which is something like a mix of nationalism, protectionism, and public spending.
Nosotros. Y cuando hablo de nosotros, hablo del movimiento político al que pertenezco. Yo sí, del peronismo, sí.
But in 2015, a new government arrived, that of Mauricio Macri, with the mission of rebuilding the country from the top to the bottom.
Yo, Mauricio Macri, juro por Dios nuestro Señor y estos santos evangelios, desempeñar con lealtad y honestidad el cargo de presidente de la nación argentina.
In the 2017 legislative elections, the Argentine people renewed their trust in this process. Basically, they came to say, well done, Macri. So the question that has recently arisen is, is Argentina finally ready, once and for all, for takeoff? Well, let's have a look at it, shall we? On October the 22nd, 2017, elections for Congress and the Senate were held in Argentina. The government coalition, Cambiemos, had an overwhelming triumph with more than 10 million votes. They won 15 out of the 24 electoral districts, including the top 5. These are the most populated ones: Buenos Aires Province, Buenos Aires City, Cordoba, Santa Fe, and Mendoza. Something like that hadn't happened since 1985. Now, after these elections, Cambiemos is close to having an absolute majority, which ensures the government's ability to push their reform agenda forward.
Hoy estamos acá, no porque estemos en contra de nadie. Nosotros no somos anti nadie, estamos a favor de nuestro futuro, porque creemos que merecemos vivir mejor.
For this reason, several analysts have stated that this is the true beginning of Macri's term. So after 2 years of power, what has Macri done? What hasn't he done? And what are his intentions? You're going to find the answers to all of these questions in today's video, but before we do that, let's take a look back at the history.
Downfall.
A century ago, Argentina was one of the richest countries in the world, even richer than countries like Canada, Australia, France, or even Germany. And not only that, when World War II ended on May 8, 1945, this country was, along with the United States, one of the largest creditors in the world, and also one of the largest gold owners on the entire planet. At that time, Buenos Aires, the Argentine capital, was in full swing and could even rival New York. But of course, having said all of that, you might now be wondering, what the hell happened to Argentina? Well, even though things didn't look bad for this country after the Second World War, the truth is that something was already changing. The great international crisis of the 1930s affected this country a lot. Argentina, which was a huge agricultural exporter, suffered, and it had its first major financial crisis. And since that time, all those years ago, nothing has been the same. Politics, dear viewer, began to intervene in every economic and societal field. Finally, in 1946, what we could call the definitive turn, it began. The government of General Farrell first, and then Colonel Juan Domingo Perón, approved all kinds of rules and laws, more than 16,000 in fact, which put the economy under state control. Something which, for example, meant that things like foreign trade, business creation, or competition wouldn't really be a priority. Instead, policies such as import substitution, nationalization, and large state enterprises, they became the order of the day. This is how a 70-year downfall began, which made Argentina become one of the very few countries that has gone from a developed country to a developing country. Economic crisis, hyperinflation, and payment suspension have become very, very common problems talked about in the Argentinian media in recent decades. And this process culminated with Kirchnerism, from Cristina Fernández de Kirchner.
Chu, ni men, chu ni se, voilà.
how to ruin a country.
Throughout her 2 terms as president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner set up a model that could simply be defined as uneconomical. Yeah, Argentina was already pretty terrible at business, but Cristina, she took it a step further. See, in CFK's Argentina, there were capital controls, companies couldn't repatriate their profits, taxes on companies reached incomparable proportions in Latin America, there were lots of restrictions on imports, and the central bank was only dedicated to making money in order to finance the government. The model was so terribly uneconomic that CFK set up a lot of taxes on exports. Yes, who would really think of punishing companies that are exporting, selling to other countries? It's pretty crazy indeed.
Uno mira y ve que el mundo está mal y se preocupa. Y es normal, porque no podemos vivir desconectados del resto. Por eso nosotros tenemos que cuidar nuestro mundo. Este mundo que tanto nos costó armar y que tiene que ver con poder vivir mejor, sin depender tanto de la afuera. Por supuesto que queremos que todo mejore, no somos tontos, y mucho menos egoístas. Pero para nosotros, el primer mundo debe ser siempre Argentina.
But that isn't all. With Cristina at the helm of the Casa Rosada, the Argentine White House, this country became one of the most protectionist in all of Latin America, and also a country where setting up companies was incredibly difficult. And of course, the results, they were immediate. During her second term, growth was null, the public deficit soared, inflation rose to 40%, investment collapsed, and suddenly, again, nothing seemed to work. This is how, in December of 2015, the Argentinian people chose Mauricio Macri, former president of Boca Juniors, as the new president of Argentina.
Quiero ser el presidente que pueda acompañarlos en su crecimiento. El presidente del desarrollo del potencial de cada argentino.
Macri's arrival.
Mauricio Macri's first year leading Argentina, it wasn't easy. Of course, this was bound to happen because of the terrible state that he inherited the country in. For example, he reduced electricity and natural gas subsidies, but because reforms never have immediate results, things didn't look so great at the beginning. In 2016, the country suffered a severe recession with a GDP drop of 2.6%. Inflation also approached 40%. Poverty, unemployment, deficit, and external debt also increased. In other words, there were ample opportunities to criticize Macri. I mean, wasn't he the one who promised that things were going to change? Well, as we said a minute ago, reforms do not have immediate results. But in the end, those changes, they do arrive. In 2017, the Argentine economy was finally showing signs of improvement. This year's growth may exceed 3%, and the appetite for investment is already more than evident. Yep, that's right. It looks like Argentina may be coming out of that long tunnel. For the time being, these results have given Macri the great electoral victory that we've just seen. Now we come to the question of, well, what exactly did the president do? Well, basically he reduced all of the crazy regulations and policies that had been put in place. The new government, it soon got to work reducing these because, in their eyes, there was no time to lose. As soon as he arrived, he eliminated currency controls, he allowed foreign investors to repatriate their profits, he eliminated the most incomprehensible export taxes, and reduced subsidies and restrictions on imports. And all of this was with one clear objective. Argentina had to recover its productive economy. Also, and this is really important here, Macri reached agreements with some of the international investors that Argentina hadn't paid in 2001 and with whom it still had judicial fights.
Argentina reached an agreement with the venture funds after 14 years of struggle. In total, to cover all the debts with the funds, Macri offers $6,500 million. This agreement implies a 25% reduction.
On the other hand, the new government approved a kind of fiscal amnesty, which brought to light no less than $117 billion that Argentinians had abroad and had not declared. But before you think this is a huge scandal, do think about what would happen if you were afraid that your savings could be confiscated by the government. Some sometimes it's not just about not paying taxes. When states don't have legal security, it's easy for money to simply disappear. The fact is that with all these measures, Macri's government has managed to get much of that money back to Argentina. And since then, there's been an influx of money which has triggered things like real estate sales and car sales.
We are breaking records. More than 780,000 cars have been sold to this date, and most importantly, trucks. This means that production is moving, construction is moving. Mauricio Macri.
It looks like the engine, quite literally, has started again.
Volkswagen will invest $650 million to modernize plants in Argentina.
But one question arises, and that's, is everything really so exemplary? Is everything really so perfect? Well, hold on a moment, because the truth is that until now the reforms have been very, very gradual and had a fairly limited range, something that, in spite of the electoral results and all those calls to uncork the champagne, has alerted several experts.
At the moment of truth, so far he hasn't done much beyond removing Kirchnerism from power, which isn't little. Even though he did say that these elections are the endorsement for the reforms, we don't really know what they are, what he wants to do. Carlos Rodriguez Braun, Argentine economist.
But why so much distrust? Because despite the reforms we've seen, it seems that this government is struggling to overcome some of the typical problems of Argentina's previous governments. For example, public spending has not decreased. It continues to rise and rise, which has caused, among other things, foreign debt to soar by more than $50 billion since Macri came to power. And that's not all. Taxes are through the roof. The central bank continues to finance the government with new money, and according to the latest Doing Business report, which measures the ease of doing business in a country, Argentina is still way down in 116th place. Now, to be fair, we can say that Macri has two pretty good excuses. First is that not much time has passed, and second, his political position in Congress and the Senate were very weak. Now, after these last elections, all of that is finally over.
A reformist agenda.
It seems that after his crushing electoral triumph, President Macri has made it clear.
We are entering a stage of permanent reformism. Argentina doesn't have to stop, it doesn't have to fear reforms, because to reform is to grow, to evolve, to progress. Mauricio Macri.
He certainly has a task ahead of him which is somewhat complicated. But, well, what are his priorities? Well, fundamentally, dear viewer, at first it's something that is as unpopular as it is necessary, reducing public deficit and controlling inflation, which are ultimately related. Then he's going to get Argentina back to being a competitive and attractive country in which to invest. To achieve this, it has promised to approve a tax reform that reduces taxes on businesses and a labor reform that facilitates hiring, as well as more free trade agreements.
Argentina and Chile signed the most ambitious free trade agreement in 20 years.
Then pension, educational, and infrastructure reforms are next. Yes, we can certainly say that Macri has a lot of work to do if he wants to meet the high expectations that have been placed on him. In any case, it does seem as if a new political and economic era has begun for Argentina. A good example is Macri's commitment to reducing poverty by formalizing and extending property to the most disadvantaged.
Argentina delivers housing certificates to 1.5 million people in slums. Macri's government will give them the documents to access water and electricity legally.
And by the way, we will be discussing how to fight poverty in a future video, so, subscribe. For now, the question is, will this country become great once again? If they manage to deepen their reforms and take advantage of all their opportunities, such as the lithium industry, which we've discussed previously, I have little doubt that this will be the case. And now we want to know what you think. Will Argentina become a great example for the rest of Latin America? Do let us know in the comments below, as well as in this survey, and I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Please hit that like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for brand new videos every Monday and Thursday, button on the screen as well as below me now. Also, do check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine, and as always, thank you for watching.
Quiero ser el presidente que pueda acompañarlos en su crecimiento. El presidente del desarrollo del potencial de cada argentino.